Now go! And let the legend come back to life.
Oh man.
After a string of increasingly disappointing E3s that were more about hyping up investors rather than future customers, this year's Expo felt a bit nostalgic. A new generation of consoles is coming in for the first time in what feels like forever, and this means that the big AAA corporate overlords of our hobby get to inject the show with a healthy dose of risky speculation and major surprises. There's a lot of brand image rhetoric going on between the three competing consoles, and Microsoft's zigzagging policy reversal flipped the situation on its head almost as soon as it began. In other words, these corporate overlords still don't really seem to know how exactly the next gen is supposed to work, but they've given us a lot to talk about while they figure it out. Last year's event, on the other hand, felt like it was full of a bunch of filler, so there's a lot of subjects to rifle through here. So much, actually, that I'm finding it pretty hard to write all this in one continuous editorial, so I'm gonna chop it up into topics. But it might be a good idea to get the biggest, longest, and hardest one out of the way first. The next generation of consoles is like a big indecisive elephant in everyone's room that can't really decide which room it should be in or how big of an elephant it should be. Everyone knows that Sony's press show wiped the floor with Microsoft's press show, but what people seem to be forgetting is that they did that by simply maintaining the status quo. They also seem to be forgetting that applauding a corporation's press show performance is kinda like applauding the concession stand commercial before a movie. At E3, Microsoft had made the competition so rotten that Sony could seemingly get away with whatever, and all things considered, they kinda did. The PS4 will be subscription supported after all, and that's probably to make up the difference from their low price point that cuts a good $100 underneath the Xbox. They're also leaving a good portion of the DRM policy up to publishers, and people should seriously know by now not to trust those guys to responsibly handle DRM. But by virtue of being simply less bad than Microsoft, Sony managed to coerce the internet hive mind into a few days of worshipping their brand, and it got seriously creepy for a while. And this mentality really bothers me. The big three console makers all have their share of strikes going against them, and I'm not a corporate apologist, so I haven't forgotten about all the crap that these companies have pulled over the years. And I'm not saying this stuff to perpetuate this childish console war. I'm saying it because I'd like to see more people save their money and spend responsibly rather than get caught up in the pre-release hype. And unfortunately, a lot of people come into this market with such a binary, reactionary, and almost sycophantic mindset. It's the kind of mentality that manages to misinterpret messages of consumer caution towards one brand as a kind of sinister coded message trying to hype up the other brand. Anyways, since the Xbox has completely reversed its DRM and used games policy, then these two consoles are pretty much the same two homogenized black boxes, except one has a higher price and a lot more unnecessary doodads than the other. And if you want my consumer advice on which one to buy, then I'll just advise the same thing that's been working for me every other cycle. Just wait. Wait like 1.5 years or so and then decide. By then, the prices on everything will drop, the kinks in the hardware will get worked out, and some actual games will begin to come out for these things. We'll have a better idea as to what the next gen is going to look like, and we'll also have a better idea as to which one of these things has the better game library. In the meantime, we're living in the age of the backlog. I have enough games lying around to last me a lifetime, so it's not like waiting is a hard thing to do. But games are the most important things of all. Games sell consoles, not technical specs or internet features or media center multitasking. The PS2 wasn't the most successful gaming console in history because it was graphically underpowered and way too late to the online bandwagon. It sold as much as it did because it was a cheap way to access the most diverse and gratifying game library ever. With that being said, all that this year's E3 revealed was a new lineup of the inevitably awkward launch titles. I apologize in advance for not having the time to write about them all, but if I did, I probably also wouldn't have the time to eat or sleep. Anyways, let's get this party started. So here's a game that's driving the internet nuts, but I guess I'm gonna start us off by being the devil's advocate once again. The Division is a third-person shooter with a bunch of pseudo-MMO features that seamlessly teleport other players into an instance that you're running in with friends. We can see a big sandboxy map to explore and some light RPG elements going on, but there's gotta be a singular core mechanic somewhere in the middle of all this. Right now, it seems safe to assume that that core is the kind of spongy, stop-and-pop cover shooting that got old around the same time Kane and Lynch 2 came out. There's also this cross-platform connectivity feature where a friend on a tablet can join in and mark targets for the rest of your own people. But I can't help but question how much fun this guy is gonna have compared to this guy. What's the motivation here for taking the role of an underpowered sidekick who just passively helps out the guys playing the real game on a real console? How rich and satisfying can it be to tap on images of NPCs on a screen while the other people actually engage in all the interactions with those NPCs? Until further notice, I'm just gonna assume that the only mechanic they've set up to make this activity rewarding is just gonna be a bunch of gamification XP metering rather than a game that actually feels gratifying in your hands. There's also a serious problem to consider behind any game that tries to seamlessly integrate multiplayer into the single-player experience, and that is that most people you find on the internet are pretty much dicks. Ubisoft advertised the demo of this game using people who had to strangely sound like they were guys playing a game, while also sounding like they were guys who were in the middle of a battle. But unless you're playing in a super serious clan, no one actually talks like this in a game.
Wow, yep. I'm gonna go in.
Okay. I've got my group heal loaded, so if you guys want to check your skills and switch it up, you can.
They usually talk like this.
Wait, mate, I'm not talking to you, so shut up.
Oh, look. He's getting mad because I'm fucking raping him.
The Battlefield series has always been a kinda guilty pleasure for me. I'm thinking of going into greater detail in another episode, but I'm afraid to say that the last Battlefield game kind of burnt me out in comparison to the others. I enjoy Battlefield 3, but not without putting up with a bunch of issues that they could be handling better. To sum it up, it has a lot to do with DLC and interface problems ruining the fun of what is a solid game otherwise. And I gotta admit, I was pretty skeptical about Battlefield 4 until I finally saw the multiplayer demo from E3. After all, it's not like anyone plays these games for the campaign, so I don't know why they spent so much time showing that off earlier.
Becky, you conscious? Get back in the game, man. Stay with me.
But anyways, the individual art assets do pretty much look like an expansion of Battlefield 3, but there's a whole lot of features going on here that at least elevate it to a more substantial expansion than usual. The destruction looks like it's been ramped up a considerable degree, the water surface changes shape and morphs around for everyone on the server, and upping the standards for the console's player limits means that the rest of us will probably get maps big enough to comfortably accommodate 64 players. But the thing that really got me was this little tablet they cut to. Check it out, it's Commander Mode from 2005. Back when Battlefield games were really about organizing massively collaborative team efforts, and also cramming as much content into one map as possible. Just imagine how many more dimensions of situational awareness and strategy that this will add to the game. I actually think it's particularly progressive because we didn't have tablets in 2005. But it's not like there aren't a lot of problems with this, and those problems don't end with the series embarrassingly trying to live up to features that were standard in the 2005 version. Marketing overpriced DLC packs as a separately sold premium version of the game devalues the experience with the pitiful temptation of knowing that you should always be paying for more. It divides the player base between the rich and the poor, and withholds content that's ready for distribution during launch. They've already announced 3 DLC packs and a premium service, and this game isn't gonna be out for like another half year. It's getting ridiculous, and right now, the Battlefield brand seems most in danger of being turned into a series of disposable games. They're cranking these things out fast, and I'd hate to see DICE's quality get burnt out by the overwhelming demands of a publisher who will never be satisfied. Speaking of DICE and EA, these guys may be overwhelmed as it is. They revealed new Battlefront and Mirror's Edge games, so it was pretty entertaining to see the internet get overtaken with a wave of cognitive dissonance. Suddenly, everyone was questioning whether or not they should still hate EA, but as far as I'm concerned, announcing overdue sequels fits right within their motif. It's unsurprising news, really. These have probably been the 2 most requested sequels that they've been considering for years, and it shouldn't surprise anyone that a publisher is developing products that people have been demanding for so long. That's just rational business. At some point, the modern military shooter bubble is gonna burst, so I guess it makes sense to invest in alternative sci-fi shooters instead. So for now, we pretty much just have to worry about EA milking these neglected franchises dry over a short time period. Which shouldn't shock anyone either, because that's what EA typically does, and they're getting ready to do it again. Oh man, everyone's got 80s hair. The music sounds like Tina Turner, and there's this kid who might be Liquid Snake. I don't know why I would care about that, but this is looking good! Metal Gear games are at their best when they juxtapose the aesthetics of a gritty and realistic war tragedy against completely ridiculous video game stupidity. And this trailer shows a game that exemplifies all the best qualities of the series, while also going out of its way to show us how the actual gameplay works. And I'm always down for seeing more of that in our trailers. It's Metal Gear in a sandbox, and while sandbox games traditionally lighten up on story elements to make room for a player who's free to ignore or contradict them, there are enough examples of well-written story-driven sandbox games out nowadays to alleviate that concern. I suppose the only reason I have to be skeptical about this game is that Kojima's last two Metal Gears aren't exactly my favorites, but considering that this series gave us something that just might be one of my favorite games of all time, I'm always ready to give them another chance. These games have some of the best examples of what can actually be accomplished with big dumb AAA sequels. Hell, even Kiefer Sutherland's 5 lines of dialogue came out pretty well. This is one of the most substantial and skillfully made game trailers I've seen in years, and all of that confidence kinda rubbed off on me. I'm actually looking forward to this one. As these next-gen consoles begin to look more attractive, it's important to know that they're still retaining the same business politics and trends that defined the last generation. All the games I've mentioned have been announced as non-exclusives for multiple platforms. They're all physically violent, gung-ho power fantasies that rely on expensive cinematic spectacle to impress. Only one isn't a sequel, but you wouldn't know it at first glance, and they all look a whole lot like stuff we've played before. The PS4 and the Xbox One are both simply two tentacles of giant megacorporations with seemingly unlimited funds, and both of their bottom lines have nothing to do with video games. And E3, as an event, is only there to generate hype for these products. And hype is a gamble, a bad gamble. If you don't get hyped for something that ends up disappointing, then you have nothing to lose. If you don't get hyped for something that turns out great, then it's this totally awesome, pleasant surprise that feels completely unadulterated by marketing. It takes you off guard, you don't know what to expect, so it exceeds your expectations. Plus, getting hyped up for something sets a personal bar for your expectations that's not likely to get met by the final product. If you get hyped for something that turns out actually good, then it's probably still not as good as what you were led to expect. Because marketing is hyperbole. I've had some legitimately good games ruined for me because of the hype, because I had been set up to expect something that they weren't. And because of this, I usually try to black out as much pre-release marketing material as possible. I'll admit that I'm hyped for Metal Gear Solid 5, but I might have already ruined the game by setting my expectations higher than what it can possibly deliver. I may never be more excited about it than I am right now. Right now, it's still a long way away from release, and more concrete and down-to-earth media hasn't been revealed. It's all cinematic trailers and scripted, doctored, HUD-less gameplay. There's still room for speculating about it being my own personally perfect Metal Gear game, but it's not gonna be that. I wish I wasn't thinking like this, but that's what this kind of marketing does to you. I want to go into it blind. I want to be completely surprised by this game and not know what kind of a trip I'm in for, but that experience is something that hype takes away. It ruins the surprises and spoils the twists. It gets you mind-jacked into a self-congratulatory fanboy mentality that sees you falling for games as products rather than as expressions. Hype isn't there for your fun. It's there for making other people money by tricking you into buying stuff you don't need and might never have actually wanted in the first place. It makes you realize that these companies aren't being honest with you, and it causes you to question whether or not you're being honest with yourself. It's an unpleasant experience and a bad gamble. And that's why you should just wait. Just wait.